Good afternoon and good morning for our North American viewers. I'm delighted to be your host today for this sharing session about the 2026 edition of the Fleet and Mobility Barometer. My name is Guillaume Saint. I work for IPSOS BVA, and I'm a mobility and automotive specialist. In order to share those results today, I have three guest speakers with me. Caroline Pellissier from Arval. Hello.
Hello, Guillaume.
Zinga Lucien from Elements.
Hello.
And Abe-san from SMAS.
Hello.
So today we will be, for 30 to 40 minutes, sharing insights about what the fleet manager are thinking today about their daily work. Of course, we operate in a world of mobility and with a lot of different forces that can shape and change the context in which the fleet managers are operating. Before we start, I would like to probably remind four of those factors of change that will definitely resonate with the insight that we will share with you later on. The first one is the ongoing shift in the vehicle ownership model, shifting away sometimes from the simple purchasing to much more flexible mode. The second one is for the fleet manager to reduce the financial burden that represent important company cars fleet. The third one is the uneven progress of the electrification for the cars, for the fleets, and the way it impacts the day-to-day work for the fleet manager, who sometimes have to deal with mixed mode of fleet composed of EV car and ICE car. And the fourth one, that is probably also very impacting the daily life of the fleet managers, is the ambition to leverage connectivity and connected data in order to optimize the journeys of their fleet and also to start or to accelerate the predictive maintenance. So before deep diving into the results, Caroline, would you mind to give us a little bit more information about the scope of this year's Fleet and Mobility Barometer?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for this great introduction, Guillaume. So the Fleet and Mobility Barometer, the 22nd edition actually, is the flagship publication of the Arval Mobility Observatory. It provides a comprehensive overview of the fleet and mobility industry trends, whether it's on fleet characteristics, evolution of energy mixes, financing method, new mobility policies or solutions. So it's really a broad overview of the market. And in 2026, it's actually quite a special edition. We cover 33 countries, more than 10,000 companies surveyed in partnership with IPSOS. So it's really a truly unique global overview and also the most contrasted and operationally focused landscape to date.
Yeah, and I would like to add to this because I think the barometer is a combination of a global scale with local insights. And I think it's a really great tool for benchmarking, for understanding regional differences, and really informs how we make decisions within fleet as well.
Well, for us, this is the first year we have participated in the survey, and we are very pleased to be part of it, covering India, Indonesia, and Thailand. In Asia, there haven't been so many structured mobility studies like this, so the barometer has been extremely valuable for us. It helps put data behind what we see on the ground, and it also provides a strong reference that we can use both internally and in discussions with our clients and partners.
All right, so very large scale, very important themes that are discussed with the fleet manager. And you did mention 22nd edition. Mm-hmm. So along the year, there is, we know, a massive source of information, a massive source of insight and data. And so my first question for you, Abe-san, will be probably quite difficult. If I ask you to extract one key insight that is either surprising or that is for you of particular relevance for the fleet managers, what would it be?
Well, that's a difficult question. What stands out to me this year was not one single surprising number, but rather a clear shift in mindset. Overall, companies still see mobility as a key business enabler, And direction is clear. Electrification, data, new mobility solutions are already part of the discussion. But what the barometer highlights here is a clear shift in focus from what we want to do to how we actually make it work in practice. So in that sense, this transition from ambition to execution fits very well with what we see across the 3 countries we cover. And I believe this is something we see globally as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with Abasan. I think the word that would stand out for me is resilience. I think 91% of fleets said they would either grow or remain stable, you know, in the coming year. And especially in this current environment, I think that really speaks to the discipline that we've put in place. Within North America, it's quite optimistic as well. So I think there's been a shift away from not just the mindset of growth, but how do we optimize our fleets? And I think that's what this data responds to.
All right.
Absolutely.
Erin, your first impression.
Yeah, well, I fully agree with my colleagues here. So 2026, I feel it is a year of transition from ambition to execution, absolutely. The companies, they no longer are simplifying or expanding their electrification, launching new mobility policies. They are now optimizing, operationalizing in a context that is marked by economic pressure and also regulatory uncertainty. So they have to make this strategy resilient. And if we talk about Europe specifically, well, I would say that there is a more measured dynamic than in other regions. You mentioned the US that are quite optimistic. We cannot say the same for Europe because I believe that only 22% of the companies surveyed said they would expect their fleet to grow in the next 3 years. So, but still, it's not a slowdown rather than strategic optimization for the companies in Europe. They are fine-tuning their fleet size, the evolution of their energy mixes, their financing method, to make it more aligned also with the operational constraint that they face on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. So, in other words, it's not about, for those companies, how fast do we grow, but more how do we go sensibly and sustainably.
All right, thank you. So you did mention about sustainability or the energy transition. I think one of the key topics for the fleet manager is definitely the electrification of the fleet. We know it's not easy. And I would like to take the benefit of having you representing 4 regions, Europe, LATAM, North America, and Asia, to share a little bit your perspective on where this transition to electric car is in your respective markets, and also what are the key barriers or the key drivers that will lead to the scalability of the electrification of the company fleets. So maybe I would ask you, Caroline, maybe to start.
Okay. Well, one thing is clear, electrification remains a key pillar of fleet transformation, really a key lever also for the company survey. So as you can see, I think on the screen now, 66% of the companies globally have or are considering implementing alternative technologies in their fleets. Yeah. What do we mean by alternative technologies? It's BEV, PHEV, or HEV. So it's quite a lot. And in Europe specifically, it's the most mature region because I believe it's a 57% EV adoption rate, so quite a lot. In LATAM, it's a bit more marginal at this stage, but what is positive, I would say, is that it's more and more considered. So we'll monitor this situation in the next few years, I would say. Really what is clear, so electrification is still a key pillar, but in a more pragmatic approach, I would say, again, due to the overall context. So they have to make it align also with their TCO approach, so the total cost of ownership, of course, and also in a more operational manner, I would say. So, and there are also some constraints. One key constraint, I believe we'll talk about it a bit later on, is the charging availability, of course.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm turning to you, Zinga.
Yes.
In North America, there's been I would say, last decade, many new brands popping up with pure EV technology reaching the market. I wanted to know what is in the US and in North America more broadly, this trajectory of the electrification of company fleet.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say certainly not moving as aggressively as we are in Europe. We're sitting somewhere in the pragmatic middle ground within North America. I think approximately 50% have included electric vehicles within their fleet, but there are some constraints. As you know, there's one of the drivers being economic. So a lot of fleet managers are looking towards TCO parity before they scale. And that's going to continue to happen as electrification evolves. Another barrier is definitely the infrastructure. So I think within the study, 68% cited that was a barrier for them, infrastructure. And if you think about the shared geographic scale of North America, it makes the deployment of charging stations very difficult, but also we're waiting on which comes first, the infrastructure or the vehicles themselves. So I say it's definitely moving towards electrification, but fleets are being a little bit more selective and employing electric vehicles where it makes financial and operational sense.
All right, and you did mention as well the charging point and the charging infrastructure.
Yes.
That remains, let's say, a kind of barrier or element that may slow down the electrification of the fleet. So my question to you is, because you work as partner of the fleet managers in your respective company, so do you foresee already some winning strategy to overcome that barrier? Or have you heard something special in the barometer from the fleet manager in terms of the strategy that they have already implemented to try to cope with this issue?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think most of the fleets within North America, they employ somewhat of a portfolio type strategy. I think it's tailored really towards how they're actually using their vehicles. So in cases where the fleet is centralized, they would employ a depot strategy. In instances where the infrastructure or the reimbursement framework actually exists, then it's public. And of course, it depends on the utilization of the assets as well. And in cases where the drivers take the vehicles home and there's an actual home, then they would employ home-based charging. And we're seeing increasing use of home-based charging within North America as well. I think definitely it's not a side topic, charging as a whole. It's integrated in the entire design decisions when it comes to vehicle purchases and electrification.
All right.
Yep.
All right. And Karin, in Europe, is this the same, I would say, type of approach?
Yeah, well, in Europe and globally, I would say I'll be also talking to you, my colleagues, on this. So the charging infrastructure is key for electrification. Without the right infrastructure, there's no electrification, actually. So as you mentioned, Zinga, is absolutely something that is considered as the main constraint today for the company surveyed. But what's really positive and the reasons to be optimistic is that also the companies are tackling this issue and taking some action already. So 99% of the companies surveyed actually have or plan to have a charging policy or solution in the future. So this is really quite positive. And I believe that hybrid mix, I would say, is the best solution for the companies. So what I mean by that is have the possibility to charge at the company's premises, which is today the major solution used by the companies. But then you also have public charging, which is quite important and more developed, especially in Europe. And then finally, home charging, which works quite well, especially when it is supported financially by the companies for the company car driver.
All right. And another element that has been interesting within this edition, and it was already the case in past years, I must admit.
Yeah.
But is the question of the regulation. We know regulation is not very straightforward. So the rules may change, the incentives plan may change, and sometimes it is perceived as a little bit of a start and stop type of approach. So my question to you is, with regard to the evolution of those regulations that create sometimes a little bit more uncertainty than the long-term vision, have you seen some specific strategy from the fleet manager to cope with or to comply 100% to the regulation? How would you say that the fleet manager are reacting today?
Singa, would you like to start?
Singa, would you like
Yeah, absolutely. I would. I think compared to what you may see in Europe, where it's centralized based on the countries, it's a little bit more fragmented in North America, I think. We have some strong federal incentives within or regulations within the US, but there's definitely fragmentation by the states as well. I think in Canada, it's a little bit more structured, but you'll still find some variation within the provinces. And Mexico is a little bit earlier in the process, I would say. So definitely this hurts the decisions of moving forward. So it hurts acceleration into electrification, certainly. But really and truly, they're being selective. They're employing various forms of mobility, and that's helping with regards to that. But yeah, still very fragmented in that market.
In Europe, where regulation are also, quite often very important, but also evolving quite quickly.
Yeah.
What's your view on that?
A really good question. So, yeah, actually, it's more structured maybe than in the US, because thanks to, I would say, the European Union, of course. But it doesn't mean that it is less complex. We see it even more recently. And so this year, in this edition of the Barometer, we decided to introduce a new question on that matter, actually. And we've asked the companies in Europe, but also in Mexico and Chile, about the impact of a potential 100% electrification regarding their fleet. Yeah. And actually, 48% of those European companies said they would fully comply to that regulation. But another 46% said they would actually try to find alternative ways to adapt, whether it's transferring the mobility choices to the employees or some other options. So all in all, the message here is that half of the companies would fully comply, but almost another half would adapt and find other way rather than adopt a full electric fleet. So it's a strong signal and something to really look out for.
All right. Another concern that has been mentioned very clearly by the fleet managers is how they can manage the cost dimension, the financial dimension of the company car fleet. So it's true that we know almost in every region the average cost of a new vehicle climbed, I think, like over the last maybe 7, 8, 9 days, increased by more than 40% broadly for different reasons in different regions, of course, but still, the acquisition of a new car cost 40% more than 8, 9 years ago. Yeah. And the running costs are increasing as well. We know the logistic, but not only, also the cost of energy, cost of maintenance. It's an increase everywhere. So of course the fleet manager has to cope with that. Have you seen from your not only just from the barometer, but also from your on the ground experience working with the fleet manager, have you seen some interesting strategy from the fleet manager to cope with those financial pressure? Singa.
Yeah, sure. TCO is one of the top, priorities for fleets, I guess, across the globe. I'm speaking for all of our regions here, but certainly the number one within North America, citing 45%, and that will continue to happen because of the macro environment. We, as you mentioned, there's been increase in vehicle costs, over the past decade. We've had maintenance increases, energy increases, insurance. All of these things, the variability over time will definitely, heighten the focus on TCO. What we have seen, though, is that a lot of fleets are employing or moving towards leasing, for example, where it helps, of course, with creating some form of financial discipline. We've seen the employment of different forms of mobility, even the move towards used vehicles in some cases. And I think there's a general shift away from just looking at the initial acquisition costs and towards TCO as a whole, understanding from purchase all the way to the resale of the vehicle, what that looks like. So I think there's just a general shift towards some more financial engineering, financial discipline generally. So that definitely helps.
All right. And maybe, Abislan, have you noticed already a kind of, how the TCO, the total cost of ownership for electric vehicle compared to the total cost of ownership for the thermic, the inside combustion engine vehicle? Have you seen already a kind of gap in terms of efficiency, in terms of level between the two? And I may have also another question for you to bounce back on what you said, Zinga. Do you see also a tendency, a trend from the fleet manager to move to second-hand car from a used car, also to try to cope with this financial pressure? So I'm sorry, two questions in one.
Right.
Sorry.
Well, from our perspective, on the question of EV versus ICE vehicles, I would say the answer is still very much conditional in our region. EVs are not yet consistently more cost-effective than ICE vehicles because it depends on the factors such as upfront cost, utilization, or access to the charging infrastructure. Having said that, fuel prices are becoming more and more volatile recently, and in some markets, they're already increasing. So it's gradually changing the equation of TCO in favor of EVs. That said, it doesn't apply to all the situations, so I believe the cost cannot be the only driver to make a decision. In many cases, decisions are still more influenced by ESG considerations rather than by pure cost. And that's why many fleet managers are taking a pragmatic approach, combining ICE vehicles, hybrid vehicles, and EVs, depending on each use case. And at the same time, we clearly see a growing interest in operational leasing as well as second-hand vehicles to manage cost and reduce upfront investment.
Karen.
Yeah, on that point specifically regarding second-hand vehicle, very interesting. I believe in the barometer, we see that 45% of the companies are already including a second-hand vehicle in their fleets.
Right.
So, and it's almost 85 or 86%, so using and considering. So very positive. And also regarding the TCO for a second-hand vehicle, I believe it's 10 to 25% lower TCO. Yeah, depending, of course, on some criteria that we have to take into account. And so on the TCO aspect, just in Europe specifically, because it really depends by regions, we know that. But in Europe, there may be some misconception regarding the TCO of a BEV versus an ICE vehicle. In 2025, actually, I'm going to do some promotion for the Arval Mobility Observatory. Sorry for that. But we published a white paper on the total cost of ownership. And we compared the TCO for a BEV and the one for an ICE vehicle. And actually, over the full life cycle of the vehicle, depending on some criteria, of course, a BEV costs less than an ICE vehicle. Why? Simply because if we take a look at the energy cost, it's 10% of the TCO for a BEV, and it's up to 30% for an ICE vehicle. So it's quite a lot, especially in this volatile environment. The maintenance costs are a bit lower, also depending on some case. I'm really using some conditions here. It's really important. And also, so in many EU markets, we just saw that the BEVs may have a lower TCO index than a ICE vehicle. And we've also done a fleet simulation in that white paper, and it shows that a company that progressively electrified 10% of the fleet annually saw their total cost rise 3 points less, actually, than a company that hadn't electrified at all.
Yeah.
Right. So also interesting to, if we combine the different elements, maybe moving towards fleet with second-hand electric car might be in the long future also one option. I would like now to cover on not a concern, but more something that may represent hope and may represent increased efficiency for the fleet managers. I'm talking about data and connectivity. We've seen in the previous years of the barometer that there were a gap between the number of company car equipping their vehicles with telematic installation, collecting data, and the number of those companies who are actually leveraging those data in order to optimize the journeys, in order to start predictive maintenance and things like that. So I wanted to know, and I will start probably with you, Abesan, whether you feel this gap between installation of the telematic equipment and the actual use of those data is still existing, or whether it is minimized, it is getting lower and lower year after year.
Great question. More fleets are equipped, but I would say the usage still remains low. This gap is not new, and we can still see it very clearly this year. From what we see in our three markets, well, the pattern is very similar. Connectivity is improving, but turning data into day-to-day operational decisions is still a challenge. And I think the main reason is complexity. Many fleet managers are dealing with fragmented tools and data, which is not always easy to act upon. So even if the data exists, it doesn't always translate into daily operational value. And that's why the focus is now shifting from should we install telematics to how do we actually use it without adding complexity. So in that sense, we are moving from deployment to data value extraction. But I'm curious, is it the same in the US?
Yeah, well, definitely. I think globally, certainly within the US, we're approximately 44% with regards to equipping the vehicles. So, I mean, it exists. It's a lot better than last year, if I remember correctly. But I think, like you, the gap is certainly with those that are actually leveraging the data, right? So turning that data it's a lot of data being collected, but how do we get it to the point where it's actually creating operational value? We're not there yet. I think what most fleets are asking for is things that are a little bit more simplified, a little bit more predictive, a little bit more insightful than what we currently have. So it's definitely moving in that direction. They're asking for that. Like you mentioned, it's a lot of fragmented systems. So being able to connect all of those systems together, that it actually provides the insights to help them make smarter, better, data-driven decisions. That's just definitely the direction. So we don't have a data problem. There's enough data. It's just a matter of making it valuable, for customers, certainly.
Fully aligned here. Yeah, okay. Absolutely. Just to conclude, but you already said it, but I would say that the companies have the tools, but they lack integration. Yes. And so we've introduced also an open-ended question in the barometer this year. And one thing is clear, the company, they want simplification and integration. That is the main aspect here.
All right, and there's also another topic that we didn't mention about right now, is we talked a lot about the vehicles, the cars, but there are other ways also, to provide to employees, I would say, ways to move from A to B. So we can talk about, the employee mobility packages. So my question, and probably I will start with you, Abesan, do you foresee some important evolution from traditional company car to different ways of attracting and retaining some of the talents thanks to an employee mobility policy? How would you say things are evolving right now?
Well, in Asia, employee mobility is becoming one of the most dynamic areas of fleet management. One important thing is that employee mobility can mean different things depending on each local context. And in our three markets, it remains practical, often linked to daily commuting needs. So to your question, yes, we do see a shift beyond the traditional company car, but it's not a replacement. It's more an extension. Fleet sizes are expected to stay, expected to remain stable or even grow. So what we see clearly here is this shift is also largely driven by HR, because mobility is now increasingly considered as a tool to attract and retain talents and also provide more flexibility to employees. So overall, there's no one-size-fits-all model. It's truly about building practical and locally adapted solutions that company can actually implement.
Okay.
Yeah. We're actually very close to what you're seeing in your market. Definitely, within North America, I think a company car remains core. It's central to all we do. I spoke earlier about just how vast the U.S. is. I think moving away from urban locations, it's less likely. In urban locations, more likely to have different forms of mobility. So it's evolving very slowly, but I think definitely moving in that direction. But we're seeing complementary services, complementary forms of mobility around the company car rather than a direct shift away from it.
Fully agree here. It's I mean, the company car remain very central to the company strategy regarding fleet and mobility. That is certain here, but it's the mobility, the other mobility, the alternative mobilities are really about complementary aspects, I would say, to the company car. And what we see in Europe is quite similar in some aspect to other regions. I'm thinking of what you say, Abesan, but it's really HR related. So, but also just one quick figure also to mention from the barometer: 94% of the companies have or plan to have a mobility policy or solution in the future, which is quite a lot. And it's global. It's for Europe, but also global. So something to mention. It's a real clear shift from company car only to a mobility ecosystem, I would say, clearly. And in Europe, well, the situation is a bit different than in the US. I think it's also geographical. As you say, it's quite vast, the US. But it's really a sustainability tool. That is certain, but also really about employee empowerment, the mobility solutions. So yeah, quite important.
Interesting. What I like in what you all say is that we do see some common trends across the region, but we do see also the importance of the local nuances, the regional nuances, which is extremely important to keep in mind in order to help the manager to manage their fleet in the most effective way. So that's for today. And now, let's jump a little bit into tomorrow, into the future. I would like now to ask you to project in 3 years, 5 years. And I would be very interested to get your personal outcome on 3 main topics. The first one is, what would be the most important trend in the next 3 years? Second one would be, what in your region, what is the most critical issue that the fleet manager will continue to have to solve in order to fully optimize and to make as efficient as possible their mobility policy. And the third one would be a call to action for the fleet manager who are maybe listening to us. According to you, what would be the most important thing they need to do, not tomorrow, but today, right after the end of this webinar? What do they need to do to move into the most appropriate direction? And I would like ask you, Jinga, to start this difficult exercise.
Good luck.
I will. I'll try to make it short for you, Guillaume. So the trend I see is a movement towards mobility ecosystem management, certainly. So mass is something that, we spoke of, just various forms of mobility, but also the connection of the vehicles to the data, to services. I think these all will be integrated and, combined to make better mobility decisions moving forward. I definitely see that as being the trend moving forward. The greatest issue or constraint I see is definitely TCO management, especially in the environment that we live in, and nothing's stable within the macroeconomy.
No.
So it will definitely be something that will continue to be a challenge moving forward. Just managing all of those various cost components, for fleets. And then the call to action, I think, is definitely making data central to everything that you do. I think it goes without saying that a decision is better if you're informed. So ensuring that the data tells the right stories and leads to the right decisions will be key for all fleets moving forward.
Thank you, Inga.
Yeah, thank you.
Abe-san, what would be your key takeaway on those 3 points?
Well, looking ahead, I don't expect sudden disruption, but rather steady and realistic progress. So if I start with the main trend, we clearly see a shift from ambition to execution. Electrification, digitalization, new mobility solutions, they are all moving forward, but in a very pragmatic and phased way. And key challenge, I would say, to find the right balance between cost control and sustainability. And the last one action I would recommend starting now is to focus on practical use cases. Start small, test, and then scale step by step using the data you already have. So the direction is clear, but the success will depend on execution. And that's exactly what we mean by moving from ambition to execution.
Okay, thank you very much. Caroline?
Yeah, well, it's a mix of all you said, actually, but I would say that the future for the company fleets will be shaped by pragmatic transformation for them rather than acceleration at all costs. Again, we mentioned it, but they are facing rising operational costs, operational constraints, economic headwinds, so it's quite difficult. So they need to adapt their strategy to become more realistic, more data-driven, and also more focused on execution. That is quite important. So on the future trends, of course, we cannot not talk about electrification. I see electrification still staying strong on the company fleet strategies. But the real trend, I believe, will shape the future, will be the digitalization of the industry. It's a strong call also for action, but from the companies themselves, actually, they really want to have access to that ecosystem, and that is something that should be coming up in the future, the near future, I would say. And we haven't talked a lot about it, but I think that the financial models will evolve. So we haven't talked about it, but you have a full chapter on the barometer, actually, so go check it as soon as you can. But that will also have an impact. My colleagues here talked a lot about TCO, and there are many financial levers also to face that TCO constraint, I would say. And so I would say for the companies that are listening to us today is to go for pragmatic electrification. That is quite important. Let's remind of the TCO aspect. The progressive annual electrification is quite important here. Having access to smarter digital tools, that is important. The usage of data, we cannot mention it enough. And really balancing all of that with a sustainable approach, but also a cost-efficient approach.
Okay. Economico, ecolo, transition. That's good.
Great conclusion.
Okay. So I would like to thank you very much, Abe-san, Zinga, and Caroline, for sharing with us those insights from the 2026 edition of the Fleet and Mobility Barometer. And of course, a warm thank you to you all who attended this webinar. I'm pretty sure you'll be curious to know more about the data and insight of this 2026 edition of the Fleet and Mobility Barometer. You can find those reports and many more very interesting things on the website of the companies of our guest today. So Arval, Element, and SMAS. Thank you very much. Wish you a very pleasant end of day, and say collectively goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.